I love that you are joining us. Welcome to Spirit Uncensored. I will give you a little rundown of who we are, how we got here, and just really want to preface and start by saying that this is an open dialogue. Hey, Ray, love that you're here as well. The intention for this is to be an open dialogue. And Spirit Uncensored, that's really what our events have been about from the very beginning. We never had the Sunday Night Live title is new for our second Sunday events, but the intention around Spirit Uncensored second Sunday events has always been interactive. We've always had these spaces where we encourage people to jump into the conversation. And since we've moved to Zoom, I've noticed a lot of people are hesitant to jump in on the conversation. So do what you feel most comfortable with. If you have something to say, feel free to say it. If you feel more comfortable sharing in the comments, feel free to do that. Whatever feels right for you, you do you, boo. So know what's coming up next. I want to give you a little rundown of what we are here to do today, and also what comes after this. For the rest, we have our next two events planned for Spirit Uncensored. Every Spirit Uncensored Sunday Night Live is on the second Sunday at 5 p.m. And next month in November, because it's right by Election Day, my Uncle Gary and I will be talking about the experience of having civil conversations with family who you disagree with. That's actually Rachel's dad, who I'm talking about right now. Rachel's dad and I have very different perspectives. Hey, Helen, thanks for joining. We have very different perspectives of I want to say politics, but the conversation isn't really about politics, even though next week it will be Election Day and people, I'm sure, will have feelings about whoever's president at the time. So what will be a space for us to support one another and recognizing that many of us have different perspectives and different beliefs, and creating that container. And that's what my uncle and I are doing next month. And in December, our event is called Festive AF, and it is an open mic to celebrate the holidays. It's an interfaith experience of whatever you want to bring, whatever art form you want to bring, everything is welcome. But festivity is what is the experience that we are going for then. So that's what's coming up. But right now, I am so grateful that the four of you have joined, and we'll see if more people jump on later. Like I was saying earlier, this is an open conversation. So if there's anything that I say that you want to jump in with a question, feel free to unmute yourself and say something. If you are not comfortable doing that, feel free to write in the comments. Whatever you're comfortable doing, we support you in doing that. And I am celebrating this experience of Coming Out Day by bringing on my friend Shawn Coleman. Shawn, you want to wave? To talk about the experience of both Coming Out Day and also the term euretic consent. So the term really started with Shawn is a prayer partner of mine. We connect every Tuesday at 8 a.m. my time, 10 a.m. Shawn's time. And one day when we connected for prayer, it was a few months ago, Shawn said, I just was struck with this idea. I just got this word, euretic consent, and had so much excitement about what this term means. And Shawn, being a consent educator, was just talking about really creating a space for us to talk about consent in a new way, recognizing that in the pandemic that we're living in, it is time for us to have a new conversation about consent. And I said, great, I need a new speaker for Coming Out Day. Why don't you come in and talk about that? And also, because it's Coming Out Day, I felt like Shawn would be perfect, because Shawn is genderqueer, sexually fluid, and also polyamorous. And I felt like Shawn has come out in many different times in many ways. And so the two of us talked about this experience of how coming out has changed for us over the years in many of the different ways that Shawn has come out. So we're gonna start with that conversation, and we will lead it into a conversation about consent somewhere. We'll find the natural rhythm and opportunity to sort of steer the conversation in that direction. Does that feel good for everyone? Great. Fantastic. So Shawn, I warned Shawn in advance that I was going to give a very personal introduction of Shawn. It is the most personal introduction that I have ever given from Spirit Uncensored. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One reason is because in this experience of this pandemic, I am really developing a new relationship to my authenticity. I'm recognizing how many times I show up as my polished version. And as a minister, I definitely, on a stage, there are these specific ideas that I have of who I'm supposed to be at certain times. And I get feedback from people about what they expect from Spirit Uncensored. So I let a lot of other people's comments really affect how I show up. And so I'm just getting to know myself now that the world has kind of literally fallen away and I get to choose what spaces I exist and how I exist in them. I am sort of exploring my own idea to my own relationship to vulnerability. And Shawn is, as I mentioned, is my prayer partner. We met each other in 2003 or 4. I want to say 2003, when I was in grad school. I was in my first year of grad school, and I was doing a documentary about bisexuality. And Shawn was a organizer of the conference for bisexuality that just happened to be at the college where they were. And the woman I was dating at the time was also was interviewing for that school. So both of us went to this college, me with the intent of shooting footage from this bisexual conference, and the girl I was dating was interviewing for the college. And we knew when we got there that getting to know these people would be in my best interest, because if she ultimately decided to go to this school, I'd have this opportunity to get to know people now. And so we went to this event with that intention in mind. The interview went great, and she ended up going to that college. So I moved to Iowa with my girlfriend, and Shawn and I had met just briefly over dinner at this bisexuality conference. And so while I was in Iowa dating this woman, Shawn and I had a connection, and Shawn was open to the idea of polyamorous relationships. And at that point in my life, I was 22, and I was thinking of what's prevented me from not being out. Like, why haven't I ever been open to the idea of polyamory? And so I made a conscious decision to be open to it, and Shawn became somebody that we brought into our relationship. Not that relationship, that whole relationship did not work out. The polyamory of it with us all, I recognized and I learned for myself that polyamory is not for me. It had nothing to do with Shawn. It had nothing to do with the person I'm with. I was just very clear. Now I knew it was not for me. And I continued to have a relatively good, basically that piece of the relationship ended. Shawn and I ended, and me, the person that I started with, her name was Danielle, stayed together. And Danielle and I eventually broke up, and Shawn and I got together after Danielle and I broke up. Shawn and I were together, I don't even know how long, but I moved back to Chicago because I broke up that was the only reason I was in Iowa, was because I was there with this girl and we broke up.
Right, because if you're not in school, why would anybody be in Ames, Iowa, just hanging out? Seriously.
Thank you. That's the whole thing. And I had a job that I hated. It was my first job in TV, but as she said, like, being a mixed race lesbian in Iowa was not comfortable. I didn't like my job. I was interviewing other places, but just wasn't really getting there anywhere. So I decided to move back to Chicago, and Shawn graduated and moved into our apartment, me and a mutual friend of Shawn and mine, together. And our relationship did not work out at all. Like, Shawn and I, like, it was literally one of the worst breakups I've ever had. And the reason that I'm sharing this, the reason that I'm sharing it is because if you'd met Shawn and never had known that we had this past from 2003 to 2004, 5, 6, however long it lasted, that difficult challenge that we had early in our relationship, no one would really know that we had this issue. So I'm saying this to say that I know sometimes people are in the middle of a relationship issue and they feel like that person and them can never ever be friends again. And Shawn and I are incredibly close. You would never know that both of us had the worst relationship breakup ever, by knowing us now. And so I felt like I wanted to give you all of that context because it is coming out day. And I feel like I should share that I had a polyamorous relationship at some point, and that the person I'm sharing this stage with was that person who I'd had that polyamorous relationship with. And so at that time, Shawn and I went our separate ways, ended up coming back together as friends, and have been friends, such good friends ever since. My wife and Shawn have lived together at some point while my wife and I were dating. Like we have a very good relationship, and I'm so happy. It's one of the greatest blessings for me that we chose to really work that out. That we made this conscious effort, and it was hard. I this is what it was. Shawn was moving back to Chicago, and Shawn needed a place to stay. And that mutual friend of mine called and said, "Hey, Shawn needs a place to stay. Would you be willing to put Shawn up?" And I was like, me and Shawn are not the best of friends. I don't know if this is something I want to do, but I agreed that I would do it for a week. And we ended up being able to have like really heartfelt conversations to really forgive each other for the past. And that's why I don't even remember the moment of like, how did we make up? Because like it was 1 week, it was in 2007 or something like that. And once we were good, that was it. Once Shawn was back in Chicago and I was living in Chicago, we ended up forming a really close relationship and friendship. And Shawn is the person who creates safe spiritual spaces for me on New Year's Eve for years. This will probably be the first time in like since I've lived in LA, since I moved to LA, that we haven't done this. I usually go to Shawn's place and we do a burning bowl ceremony where Shawn always leads it. So it's a space where I don't have to be the minister for the day, that I get to be in this space with Shawn as they they lead a meditation to help reflect on the year, and then we identify a quality that no longer serves us, we burn it, and then we choose a new quality and pray over it. And that's something that I've been doing with my friends for New Year's Eve at Shawn's house. Basically, Shawn has been open to whatever. They don't ever know who's going to be there. Oh, I should specify as well that Shawn uses they them pronouns. I use she her pronouns. And so Shawn never knows who's going to be there. I just say, hey, can we do this at this time on this day? Shawn says, sure. And whoever is there. And Shawn always leads this kick-ass, deep, profound event that makes my entire year. So I will definitely miss it this year, Shawn. Ronnie and I are going to be doing it on our own in a hotel room in Ojai. That's our plan for this year. And I will definitely miss you. So I have been doing a whole lot of talking, Shawn. Is there anything that you want to say about coming out, this experience, anything at all?
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin, but I appreciate you setting the stage for vulnerability and authenticity. Yeah, that's fantastic. I also, in terms of like the healing of relationship and the growth in that way, in part thinking back, I moved back to Chicago about a week before Obama was elected. And so in part, I blame Obama. I think just like having 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 this president like be elected, and like the significance of that was huge. And it was just like, no, we gotta let all the small shit die away. We got Obama in the White House, so there's that.
That's a good reason. I get that. I feel you. So getting to that the topic of coming out. One of the things that came up in as we were doing our pre-recorded videos around this was how the coming out experience for me as a lesbian, I'll just start with me, has changed so dramatically. When I came out at seven, I was going to say came out. I didn't come out at 17. I was kind of I was very pushed out. I was caught. My mom caught me in my room with another girl, and so it was things like that. So then my mom knew, and then she kind of wanted to talk to other family about it. So it was in some ways I never made this conscious decision to tell my parents. My parents found out the hard way, and handled it badly, but it's fine. We all forgive each other for it. And that year I was 17, so this was 1998 that I started getting into relationships with other girls at the time. And between 1998 and 2000, around this time that we're talking about when Shawn and I met,
And that's beautiful that that's a thing. Still not safe or still not possible for people to come out around certain parts of their identity. And I feel really, really grateful to be living in Chicago in the time that I'm living, with like having such a strong queer community around me, having amazing Facebook groups and incredible incredible people, having Andersonville and Boys Town and stuff like that, where I could walk through the streets and there be lots of other queer people, where there be queer organizations and things like that. But I know that that's not true for everyone. And so, yeah, I just want to honor the fact that it is still hard for a lot of people to, quote, come out, and also that everybody doesn't have to, quote, come out, like it's everybody has their own journey, and we all get to disclose what we feel is best for us. And yeah, while we're waiting for Karen to return. Oh, hey, you're back.
I'm
Yay.
back. Thank you for holding down the fourth and filling that in and making sure to hit that, because that's super important of that places like Chicago and places like LA, I feel super safe. And there was an element of, for me, it was a next level in LA because I haven't been asked no one has, that's not true. I've had the one issue I can think of since I've been in LA was when we were renting apartments. I mentioned, and I always say, like, my wife or whatever it is, I was looking at an apartment and there was a landlord in particular who was really shady about the fact that I had a wife. He made some really inappropriate comments and I kind of wanted the apartment. So I dealt with it in a way that I normally wouldn't. And at some point I kind of mentally decided I don't ever want to talk to this guy again. So I don't want to live here. But other than that, in general, I haven't had it helps also that I work in Hollywood, and Hollywood LGBT is just incredibly normalized. No one ever is like, what does that mean? What do you mean you're a lesbian? It's very common, where gender identity is something that's a relatively new conversation. And I'm noticing that even though the entertainment industry, in my experience, from where I sit, and we should note that because I am a lesbian, chances are the places where I go in Hollywood are safe spaces. Daniels is who's here, works in Hollywood with me, and recognizes and know that when, as I show up as a queer person, I attract other people who are safe for me. Those are the people who choose to do things like show up for things and support me. So it makes sense that I only end up at companies where I am supported. But I'm noticing that the conversation about gender identity is just starting to get normalized in my industry. So it started, I worked at a company called CAA, where there was one assistant there that I don't know how that person identifies, but I do know they use the they them pronoun. And so they started using they them in their signature, and assistants at CAA started using their preferred pronouns there as well. And so once I started getting those emails, I'd heard that the best way to be supportive of people who use different gender identities is to you state your preferred pronouns to help normalize this idea of stating our preferred pronouns. And so I started doing it then.
Sorry.
Please,
I was
please.
trying to zone
Thank
it out
you.
of you, but yeah, the
Please.
term preferred pronouns has gone out of preference.
Thank you. This is
And
why
so
you're
yeah,
here. Tell
yeah.
me
So
more. So what what term should I be using instead?
yeah, you could just say like their pronouns or the pronouns that the person uses,
So it's the
or the
preference.
appropriate
It's the
pronouns,
preference term.
whatever. Like in the same way that you would like if you were talking about a cisgender man, having a certain pronouns, or you would say like, oh, that's a man. He uses he him pronouns, or oh, I see my friend over there, whatever. If someone else has another term that they use instead of preferred, then feel free to chime in with that. But that's how I
Thank you.
use it.
I appreciate it. So that was around the time that I started doing that, and it's not common practice yet, but I feel like I see it more in. And this was maybe about a year ago. So it's becoming normalized. We are talking about,
Mm.
I work for Juvie Productions, and what we do is we develop concepts that focus on marginalized perspectives, that are stories that are told from marginalized perspectives. And so one would think that if somebody is pitching a project about a gender non-binary person, that those kinds of things would come to me. I've read maybe 2 scripts with gender non-binary characters since I've been at Juvie, and those characters were not the main characters, but they were there and they were represented. And so basically what I'm saying is, if I'm the person who's receiving these things, it makes me feel as if that it's not completely out there, but there are definitely, and Shawn, you can definitely vouch for this as well, that there are some characters that identify as gender non-binary on television. Can you think of any off the top of your head right now? Not to put you on the spot, because I
I
can't think
think
of
it's
any.
called like Zoe's playlist or Zoe's Infinite
Those
Playlist or
infinite
something like
playlists.
that. There's a really cool
Those
character.
extraordinary playlists.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, there's
Alex
a really awesome
Newell.
character on there.
Alex Newell is gender non-binary, and the character Alex plays is also gender non-binary. And I
Mhm.
think that was what that actor brought to that role, as opposed to, I don't think they wrote that character as gender non-binary. And that's what I mean, is that this conversation is something we are just now starting to have in Hollywood, but it's absolutely not at all prevalent. And Shawn, as somebody that identifies as gender fluid, do you want to talk a little bit about what your coming out experience has been like around that?
Totally. First, I'll say that I hate the term fluid. I think it's great for other people. Like it's a very useful term, but I just don't like the way that it sounds coming out of my mouth. So I tend to say gender non-binary or something else that has, that to me is synonymous with that. Also, I did to identify my sexual orientation as polyamorous or and sorry, pansexual instead of like sexually fluid. Same reasons. But yeah, for me, um, good question. Oh yes, Orange is the New Black does have some non-binary people and so definitely some like mass of center people for sure. Um, yeah, I definitely feel like it was a process for me. It's something that I did many, many times. It's something that I like, did in college as I figured out different identities that felt true for me. And it's something that I did multiple times over the years as I like rethought and regrouped around like, okay, maybe this doesn't feel true for me anymore. And I feel like for a lot of people, there's a push to like fit neatly inside of a box, and then if you don't fit neatly inside that box, then you get to shift one time and that's it. And you're done and that's who you are, But yeah, it just didn't feel true for me. So I have stayed committed to just re-upping and renewing whatever's true for me in the moment. And I know that's been incredibly confusing for some of my friends. I know that it's been annoying for others. And I know it's been alienating for others. And it is what it is. Like I gotta be who I am, and I'm really, really grateful that the first woman that I dated in college, was incredibly just like out as who she was, incredibly authentic, incredibly true to who she was, and accepted all of herself. Yeah, every bit and part of herself, and who would like introduce herself and say like, "Hi, my name is X, and I'm a lesbian, and I'm also a sociology major," or whatever. Like it was just like part of who she was, and that was it, or like, "Hey, my name is X, I'm a lesbian, and I'm from, this town." I won't say what town she's from, but anyway, like that's the type of thing that she brought to the table. And so dating her meant that I was associated with that. I was part of that, holding hands with her around campus, which is something that she naturally did, and I kind of just went with it. It felt good to just flow with what was and to allow it to be what it was, and not to say that was easy for me, but means definitely wasn't. Like I said, there were definitely some pushback from friends and things like that. And yeah, but it just had to be what it was, and I'm grateful to have had the experience. Also, it was, yeah, very, very hard for my mom when I did share that I was dating a woman, and I told her, and these are my exact words. I was like, so I guess that I'm bisexual or something. I don't know. Like, that's how I came out to my mom because I didn't know how else to do it. Like that was just all that I knew at that time. And so I really want to affirm the people who are still figuring out what it means for them and what their sexual orientation is or what their gender identity is, like that it's okay to not have it all figured out.
I appreciate you saying all of that. And what something that was kind of coming to me is you corrected me on a couple things. You corrected me on preferences,
Mm.
preferred pronouns when I said that. You corrected me on your preferred you prefer pansexual, and you corrected me on your preference of gender non-binary. So I want to note that as a organizer, it was my responsibility to ask
Mm.
you um, what words you wanted me to use to describe your identity. This is a conversation about identity, and I did not ask you what those preferences were. I believe that part of it stems from some memory that I have from some years ago, and something that I haven't created an opportunity for is how things have changed. I know how you came out as what in 2003 when we met. That was part of the reason why I shared the nature and the length of our relationship, because I don't ever check in and say, how are you identifying today? But as somebody who organizes an event where I'm advertising you and using your bios, I should have asked you how you choose to identify. And I'm bringing this up now because I feel like as we have these conversations about identity, that it's important for organizers to identify mistakes that they've made. One of the reasons I am a minister is being the change I wish to see in the world is incredibly important to me. And so one of the things that this change I want to see is people who acknowledge their mistakes openly and identify ways to change it, so that I am setting the example of whenever any of you have the opportunity to organize an event, that regardless of whether it is an event about identity or not, if we're talking about someone's identity, we should check. It was my responsibility to check. So I apologize for that, Shawn. I'm sorry that I did not ask you in advance and used all kinds of terms that you don't prefer. So thank you for checking me on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging that. And now I fucking love that you did that because we got to have that conversation. We got to acknowledge the importance of that.
Yes. So the reason that I think this conversation about coming out and consent go together is it's the same idea, is asking, having boundaries, knowing what your own boundaries are, and articulating those boundaries to other people, and having a level of expectation of people respecting those boundaries. So I feel like this is a great time to talk about, for Shawn, for you to talk about your experience as a consent educator and what brought you to this term of euretic consent.
Yeah. So what brought me to, I guess, being consent educator is just like knowing for myself that consent is something that is incredibly important and that has shaped many aspects of my life. And I got to the place of understanding consent in new ways and creating strong boundaries through going to cuddle party events. And I see some people on here who I met through cuddle party. Hey, y'all, you know who you are and you know who each other is, but I won't out you in case you don't want to talk about that. But yeah, yeah, that's been like a lovely experience for me having those opportunities to talk about consent, to not get cuddles at cuddle parties, to be at an event that's focused around that and say, no, this is my line, or this is what I want to do, to be around people who are conscious around the types of touch they give and who ask permission for those types of things was liberating. It was like eye opening for me, truly. And knowing that that was a possibility was incredibly healing for me. Thanks, Helen, for coming out of the cuddle closet. Yeah, so I love that we call it that too, the cuddle closet. So it's also perfect for coming out day. Yeah, there are a lot of people who don't fully understand what it is. But yeah, for me, it has been an incredibly healing and transformative experience to be going to those types of events and to facilitate my own that were based on, these similar principles and ideas. And knowing that I could create a safer space for folks to heal, for folks to grow, for folks to get comfortable stating their boundaries was really profound. And this term consent is one that's often thought of as being very stagnant. You know, it's one that's pretty clear cut, one that often has a legal connotation in terms of, you know, where the line is, in terms of, you know, at some point it becomes sexual assault if you touch people in certain ways, things like that. And being really clear that that doesn't serve us, you know, and it doesn't allow people to really grow and change and honor what's true for them from moment to moment. And so this term, euretic consent, is like a new term, and it's one that, like Karen kind of alluded to, it came to me in the middle of the night. This term euretic just like woke me up, and it means like of or related to discovery or creativity. It's about evolution. And so euretic consent, when it's coupled together, is about us acknowledging the fact that our boundaries are transforming. Our knowing of ourselves is continuing to evolve, and that allows us to demand more from other folks, that allows us to see ourselves in new ways and see consent in new ways, because it's important that we get to keep asking for more. It's important that we get to acknowledge where we are now and know that that doesn't have to be where we always are. And what we're asking for right now doesn't have to be what we're always asking for. And what we're on board with or willing to do doesn't have to be what we're always willing to do. We can keep moving the line, and that's a fucking good thing.
Can I ask you a question, Shawn?
Oh yeah, of course. We always.
I really love that term, and it's making me think about, I had this queer theory teacher who taught me so many things years ago, and one of the regular phrases she used was being surprised by pleasure, and all the different ways of opening up contact to the world and contact to new ideas so that we could be surprised by pleasure. Do you feel, I'm trying to like figure out if you would relate to that in terms of like what euretic consent allows us to do?
That's interesting. I don't know.
And if that doesn't resonate with you, that's okay too.
Yeah, you say like it's about allowing new pleasure. I love that. I really love that. Yeah, the thing that comes to me first, and like I'm sure it lands differently for different people, but the thing that first comes to me is just this idea that when we are clear on our boundaries and we feel respected around our boundaries, and we know that, you know, we get to say no at any time, that it opens up so much more, and it allows us to play in different ways. It allows us to expose ourselves in new ways and to be more vulnerable. And I feel like, well, I know that when I attended these cuddle parties, I got to play with things that I never could play with before. I got to have new pleasures and new experiences. And so that was really delightful. And I also want to say, on an unrelated note, that like, Ray, I'm so glad you're here, because I honestly feel like I've learned more about gender from you than any other person on the planet. So thank you for being here and for adding your voice to this conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Shawn.
I feel like that pause made someone jump in. And I want to remind you all that this is a completely open forum. At any point, any one of you can jump in with any questions for us. But I am happy to continue to share our experience of coming out in our relationship with consent and boundaries. Specifically, you know, I've had the pleasure of having a consent educator as a prayer partner for the last few years. So I've had this opportunity to learn about Shawn's business and building their business and growing it during this time, and learning about boundary work. And Shawn asked me at some point what it was about me, why I was able to set boundaries so well, why this is something that I do so well. And I had never thought of myself as somebody who is good at setting boundaries before, and had a really hard time answering that question, because I think each one of us has our own opinion and idea around our own perception of what we let people do. Kind of like when I shared that story of allowing a landlord to ask me really inappropriate questions about my wife because I wanted the apartment. So it was just like that left a bad taste in my mouth, but it was still a choice. I still decided that I would do this, that I would participate in this conversation in this way, as opposed to, regardless of it making me feel uncomfortable. And the fact that I felt like I was at choice is, I think, what Shawn was really getting at. The fact that I consciously choose when to stand up for myself, and when I choose not to stand up for myself, it's just about my own comfort. It's never really about safety. I personally am very good at advocating for my own safety. And I think a big part of it, and I think I kind of figured out the answer later on, and halfway shared with Shawn some few weeks later, was that, was my Uncle Gary, who will be on next month, is that I grew up in a home where my mother respected my boundaries. And so because of that, I didn't notice that this was something that was easy for me to do, because I had a parent that listened to me, that asked me questions and responded to how I felt. One of the things that she did that is abnormal for a parent is, when there was food on my plate and I took one bite and I said I wasn't hungry or I didn't want any more, she always said verbatim, "Eat what you want, and what you don't want, leave there." So much so that I knew that's what I do: eat what I want, and what I don't want, leave there. So I was really raised to do what works best for me, to advocate for my safety, for my personal comfort. And so because I was safe in my own home, I think I had that same level of expectation out in the world. So I can't even give myself credit for being good at requiring other people to maintain boundaries. The reality is that I grew up in a home where I was safe enough to set boundaries, to say, this makes me uncomfortable. If there was a rule that I didn't like in my house, we had a family meeting and we talked about it. One of these rules was, when I was a teenager, my friends had co-ed sleepovers, and I wanted to be in a co-ed sleepover. Really, especially once my parents knew I was gay, and I am not bi. I don't identify as bi. I identify as gay. They knew I was gay. Still had a problem with the co-ed sleepovers. It was like really just stuck in their head that it was not okay for me to sleep in the same room with a boy because I might get pregnant, even though I knew I was not at all tempted to do anything that would involve anything that lead to pregnancy. But that was beside the point. So that was a battle I lost. That was, their whole thing was, I think it was just being parents of a teenager, that when a teenager says, listen to me, I should be able to participate or go to a co-ed sleepover. In their minds, they were just not being responsible people if they said yes to that. I think that's what that was about. But in general, I negotiated everything. I negotiated my allowance. There was open communication and conversation about these things. And so I feel like each one of us has our own relationship to consent. So every one of us is born into a different environment, and some of us didn't grow up in homes like I felt, where we really had to learn after we left home that we could advocate for ourselves, that we could speak up for ourselves, and it's a practice that's ongoing. Shawn, how was your journey to understanding and teaching consent unfold?
Yeah, for me, I definitely grew up in like the opposite household, um, where it was not encouraged for us to speak up for ourselves in terms of like the things that we wanted in that way. And there definitely was this idea of like, like kids don't have wants essentially, and that, like be quiet when adults are talking type of stuff. Um, and there were rules and they were pretty rigid. Not that my mom was a bad mom or anything like that. She just was raised differently and raised me in a different way. But it definitely required me to come to this later in life, after having a lot of negative experiences as a young adult, where my boundaries were crossed, and where at that time I couldn't even state that my boundaries were crossed, and didn't even have a full understanding of what happened, because I was still struggling to even state my boundaries, struggling to even feel comfortable enough and safe enough to figure out what I needed and what I wanted from situation to situation. Feeling very shy, very quiet, very yeah, very much like there wasn't a space for me to fully express myself, and feeling like nobody cared if I was uncomfortable, feeling like nobody cared if I wasn't fully enjoying myself or if I didn't feel free enough to be fully who I wanted to be. And so, yeah, so like the cuddle events that I talked about were a big part of my journey for sure, and definitely led me to having some incredible experiences during the events, but also to meeting some phenomenal people who like wanted to hear my no, who understood boundaries and who asked questions about my boundaries and my needs and my wants and my desires, which was just like phenomenal and helped me to have more fun in every aspect of my life, to feel safer everywhere that I go, and to feel more comfortable and more capable of being in different rooms and different situations because of it. Yeah, so that's been really, really healing, really beautiful, really empowering, and I'm really, really grateful for it.
I'm curious, as somebody that lives openly polyamorous, have you has that been a comfortable experience for you in Chicago? Has it been relatively normalized? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, the queer community in Chicago is incredibly poly, and so and the poly community is incredibly queer, and so yeah, it's not been a big issue for me in terms of yeah, in terms of finding people to date or in general in terms of feeling accepted in different environments either. And so and because I don't haven't had a traditional job in many years, I've been mostly either doing gig work slash working for myself. I have felt very comfortable like being 100% out at work and not had any fears or thoughts around that either. Not that when I have, as an adult, when I have had jobs, I've eventually come out anyway, or shared parts of myself anyway, around my identity and my sexual orientation and things like that. But it's been a non-issue for me in a lot of ways. And I love that I'm currently like, I'm a person who identifies as queer and like I brand a lot of stuff in my with my events as queer. I have queer specific events on a regular basis when in-person events are possible. um, and I guess I've done a virtual queer event as well. Yeah, and then I also like work for a queer moving company that's like all about like supporting alternative communities, queer communities, helping non-traditional families to move and things like that as well. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of my life, and it hasn't. I feel like it hasn't like held me back in any way. I haven't had any fear of not being accepted in any way. And I also live in an apartment complex that just kind of naturally came about. That like there are multiple people, I guess more people than not in my building who are queer, and almost half the building is like polyamorous as well. So and that just kind of just naturally just happened. Pretty great.
So I love that answer for a whole lot of reasons. But something that's really coming to me right now is I was at the Ohio Center for Spiritual Living this morning. Just that's where I attend services, and it's where Spirit Uncensored, when we were live, we're at Ohio in Pasadena. And so when I joined today, and we met together on Zoom afterwards, the minister there asked about and as I said in my intro for you today, like I didn't really know what to say, of what piece of our lives should I share with who you are, and what to share with this community. And so what I led with was your relationship to the Centers for Spiritual Living. And so and I'll just address that part, because this is a spiritual setting. It makes perfect sense for me to talk about that here. That the Centers for Spiritual Living is where I started as a minister through, although technically I'm not a CSL minister, but that is an issue for another day in another way. But when I first started going to, it was called the Bodhi Center for Spiritual Living in Chicago at the time. actually it was called Chicago Center for Spiritual Living at the time, and how I invited all of my friends. And the story that I shared was how I invited all of my friends, kept inviting my friends. And because I'm in my 20s, no one's really making an effort to go to church on Sunday, on Sunday morning. And so this was the life that we're living, is just hanging out, living our best life. And this one day that I said I wasn't going to go, I ended up going anyway. And Shawn and all of my friends were all in a row hanging out there. And we made this joke about them coming without, because I wasn't there, but that it was just a joke. Like we continued to, Shawn actually ended up becoming very active in the community and very involved, taking some classes, being a really strong volunteer. And in this context of talking about who Shawn is and me bringing Shawn into the spiritual space, Shawn is somebody who lives this idea of knowing that they can take ownership of their life and are not a victim of circumstance or not a victim of their identity. And I never personally made any conscious choice of, I'm only going to surround myself with people who do not think of their identity as a victim. But I think that I can't even say, like, I don't even know what it was, but just, I think the way that I describe it is that authentic people are my favorite kind of people. And I surround myself with people who choose to be themselves, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes the world. And one of the things that comes along with that is because I invited you all to a spiritual space where all faiths are welcome. I think there's a reason that a lot of my friends, including you, resonated with this idea of the science of mind, which is basically that our thoughts create our reality. So we might as well trust that we can live an authentic life, and it doesn't matter what the world looks like out there, that we can create a life that we enjoy, that we don't have to worry about the fact that that some people haven't heard of this, or some people might feel that way about that you choose to be authentic no matter what. Do you have anything that you wanted to add about that?
Yeah, definitely. It was a wonderful experience to be there in that center. And I won't say this person's name, but like it was awesome that the minister at that time was like an out person who identified on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, and who also, like, in a private conversation, like, shared that, like, polyamory is something that they've considered, that they might be interested in as well for themselves in the past. Like, not their path right now, but like definitely something that they have considered. And so, like, knowing that that person didn't need to be something specific in order to be a minister or a reverend in that center was pretty fucking cool.
I love that. Thank you. I feel like that's why the Centers for Spiritual Living resonates with me, is that I get to truly bring my authentic self to the table, that I get to create a center called Spirit Uncensored, and it's not even considered weird within this movement. It's actually something that's being celebrated. So it is this understanding, but at the same time, I want to stress that Spirit Uncensored is designed to be a space where love is our religion. So even though I identify as a science of mind minister, I live from the science of mind, and I invite other people who pray affirmatively with me. That's the kind of prayer that Shawn and I use. And I will be praying out of this event. Actually, Shawn, can I ask you if you'd be open to praying out for us? Not right now, but yeah, fantastic. So actually, let's do a round robin. I'll do it and I'll kick it to you so that we're both hitting it.
I love it.
Me too. So, but that's what I mean, is that concept of affirmative prayer. I will just actually break this down of what it is, so that when you hear it, you know what's happening. Affirmative prayer is 5 steps. This is why I keep doing this with my hands. So the first step is acknowledging the presence of God. And what I love about it is that presence of God could be energy, that it's not specific to any one idea of God, that in prayer, as we create this space for people to bring up their own image of God, it is your own image of God, whatever works for you. And if energy is a better word, think of energy. And they say this. This is not just me saying this for Spirit Uncensored. This is something that they teach at the Centers for Spiritual Living. So the first step is acknowledging God. And the second is recognizing that God is everything. This is why God and energy are used interchangeably. There is this understanding that that God and energy are literally the same thing. And because energy is literally everywhere and it cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transferred, then all of us must be energy as well. All of us must be God as well. So it's recognizing the presence of God and recognizing that we are that presence of God. And then the third is just a statement, an affirmative statement. So when Shawn and I pray together on Tuesdays, what we do is we talk about kind of what happened with our week. Sometimes we don't know what we want prayer around, and we figure it out through the unpacking of what our week looked like. And so it, for me, for instance, Daniel, you might be happy to know this, that I made this conscious decision to commit to being a TV writer. So I recently quit my job at Juvie. My last day is October 30th. And I am truly committed to breaking in. And Shawn was there for me as I was grappling with the decision of quitting my job, and then okay, I've quit my job. And so the affirmation in the prayer is knowing that I am prosperous regardless of the fact that I just left my job. That was one of the things that we were knowing to be true in prayer. The fourth step, so it's acknowledging God, recognizing that I am God too, that each one of us is God. Third is whatever it is that we're getting prayer around. The fourth step is gratitude, is knowing that just recognizing that the energy of gratitude is kind of the water. With the way that we look at prayer is if you look at prayer like a seed, that the prayer is the seed itself, and you put it in the ground, and gratitude is watering so that the prayer grows into the plants of whatever it is that you want to experience. So the fourth step is gratitude. And then the fifth step is just recognizing that it's done, that that's it. And so that's the process of affirmative prayer. And before we close out with an affirmative prayer, does anybody have any last minute thoughts, questions, feelings that you'd like to share? Going once. All right, I will consider you all complete. So I invite you to join me in this experience of prayer. This is literally how I kick off prayer with Shawn every time, is I invite you to join me in prayer by getting comfortable wherever you are, settling into the present moment, and recognizing what a gift this present moment is. That each one of us decided to spend this time choosing to be aware, choosing to be conscious of the world that we are living in, learning about different people, different identities, different experiences of identity, understanding that each one of us has the right to set our own boundaries and expect others to abide by those boundaries, showing up to know that regardless of what decisions we make, regardless of what identity we are, that we get to live our lives out loud, that we don't have to be afraid of coming out, that when we live our truth, the world corresponds to meet our needs, that there is never any reason to have worry, fear, doubt, or anxiety or question who we are, because each one of us is a divine manifestation of God. Each one of us has come to earth at this time, in this way, in this moment, with this identity for a specific reason. Each one of us is a blessing. Any belief we have, any feelings we have, any identities we own are ours. It is not for anyone else to diminish or take away. And each one of us has the right to stand our truth, speak our truth, know our truth, and demand that others respect that truth as well. So I am so grateful that we have come together for this experience today, knowing that everything that needed to be said was said, everything that needed to be heard was heard, that any donations that needed to be made are being made, that Spirit Uncensored is a thriving, successful, prosperous organization because this event and this organization exists. And I'm so grateful that we have come together here to know this today. And with so much love for Liza knowing her truth, so much love for Shawn showing up and giving of themselves for this experience. Grateful for everyone who has contributed with a question, a comment, a nod, a look, an acknowledgement. Grateful for all of the energy brought here today. With so much love, I pass to Shawn.
Yes, yes. Just knowing all of that as the truth. knowing that each and every one of us is on our right and perfect and divine journey, the right and perfect path for us, allowing us to fully honor the fact that we get to be different versions of ourselves from year to year, from month to month, from day to day, and moment to moment at times. That we get to honor who we are in this moment while also making space for who we are meant to be in the next. Knowing that every way that we show up is beautiful and wonderful and magnificent, and that we are attracting people around us who honor that magnificence, who see us in our brilliance and encourage us to keep letting our light shine. Knowing that I am grateful to be attracting people of that type, and that I'm grateful to have people around me who are also attracting people of that type. Knowing that we are growing an amazing movement of people who honor authenticity, who honor vulnerability, who honor our rights to grow and change and be exactly who we're meant to be on this planet, knowing that we are creating more space for others to do the same, that we are healing our generational pains, past, and trauma, while also creating more space for others to do the same, knowing that our light also encourages others to shine their light, and allow that light allows for more to see more people, to see more light and reveal more light in this world. Knowing that that is a beautiful, magnificent thing that continues to just bless people exponentially. Just so, so grateful to know all of that truth. So, so grateful to be right where I am right now with these magnificent, beautiful people. So, so grateful to know that it is all according to a beautiful and divine plan. I just release these words into the action of the law, knowing that it is done. And together we say, and so it is.
Oh, it is. Amen. Thank you so much, and I really mean it. Thank you, everyone, for joining, for bringing your energy and your light to this experience. If anyone has any questions that you want to ask of me individually, or stick around, I'm here. I For some reason, every time I close one of these, people just stick around and have secret questions that they didn't ask for the group, and it is what it is. Do you, like I said at the beginning, do you. And I thank you so much for joining. We will be back on Zoom next Sunday. I need to stop saying that. The second Sunday of the month, with my Uncle Gary. Thank you so much for joining. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye, Helen. Oh, bye, Tony. Oh, yay.
Bye. Bye.
Right.
Bye. Thank you, guys. That was really nice.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
I'm kind of sidetracked because I'm at work, so I'm trying to listen and work and help everybody at the same time. So, but
I'm glad that you did. I'm grateful for your presence. Thank you so much.
What's going on next week, or 2 Sundays, or what'd you say?
Your dad. I'm having a conversation with your dad.
Oh, Lord.
We gotta come back for that.
Do I get to know what you guys are talking about, or do I have to wait?
Yeah, I will create an event today for it. It's called Unity and Civility, is what we're talking about, is the two of us having very different ideas and perspectives. And we will be sharing how to have a conversation about unity with someone who you don't agree with at all. That's how I feel about your dad. I don't agree with him at all, but I can have a civil conversation with him, which I cannot have with my dad or my Uncle Jeff right now. So it means a lot to me that your dad is someone I can have a conversation, a civil conversation with right now.
All right, right on. All right, I'll look forward. I guess I should say I look forward to it, but I get tired. My dad, he's always talking about politics, and my Uncle Jeff, he's always talking about religion, and I don't even know what I want to talk about, but I know that I don't feel like I have a whole lot to add to those conversations.
Yeah, my intention is not to talk about those things. That my intention is to be able to continue to maintain a relationship with family who you don't agree with at all. So it's not like we're going to be debating the topics. I don't we don't agree. There is no coming to a level of understanding. I know what I believe and it's not what he believes. And we are agreeing to disagree. That's what's happening. So we're not diving into who's right. We both believe what we believe, but that's what we are, serving by example of knowing that families don't have to be torn apart by not having the same beliefs. That's the intention behind it.
Cool, I'll be there. I'll probably be at work, but I'll be there.
Okay. Have a great day at work, Rachel. Thank you.
Bye,
Love you guys.
Rachel.
Have a good day. Okay, bye.
Bye. It's Ronnie. Bye.
Ronnie, you can stop recording.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Thank you. How do you feel, Shawn?